He walked into the watch shop like any ordinary tourist, until he asked about a piece no one ever dares to touch. Dismissed, underestimated, and quietly observing, Keanu Reeves was about to change the fate of a forgotten design and the life of a young apprentice. What he did next? It stunned the entire store and shook the world of timekeeping forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain had not let up all afternoon. It painted the cobbled streets of Geneva in a mirror sheen, drumming softly on the awnings of the boutiques lining the Rue du Rhône. Beneath one of those awnings, a man paused. His black hoodie clung damply to his shoulders, and raindrops clung to the tips of his scruffy hair. His jeans, dark and simple, bore small flecks of dried mud, and his boots, though sturdy, showed the wear of long use. To most passers-by, he looked like just another traveler ducking in from the cold. No one recognized him as he stepped through the polished glass doors of tourbillon timepieces. Inside, the warmth and quiet pressed gently against the noise of the outside world. The shop was a study in quiet elegance. Soft golden lighting reflected off mahogany display counters. Precision timepieces, each resting on velvet cushions, ticked in measured harmony beneath protective glass. Framed portraits of master watchmakers from decades past adorned the walls. Behind the main counter stood Leon, a young apprentice with carefully combed hair and eyes that still sparkled with the excitement of his craft. He looked up as the man entered, his posture straightening instinctively. "Good afternoon, sir," Leon said with a practiced but warm smile. "Welcome to Tourbillon. May I offer you a towel?" The man pulled back his hood slightly, revealing a familiar face that didn't quite register in the young apprentice's mind. He smiled softly and accepted the towel with a quiet "thank you," dabbing his face and neck. "I was hoping to learn a little more about these," the man said, gesturing toward the center display. "I'm fascinated by the way they work." Leon blinked, momentarily surprised. Most people who entered this shop weren't curious about engineering. They were there for status, for investment pieces, for names that carried social currency. But this man seemed different. "Well, of course," Leon began, moving around the counter. "We're proud to showcase some of the most intricate mechanical movements in the world. This section here," he said, guiding the man gently toward a case in the center of the room, "features our collector line. Many of them take over a year to produce." Before Leon could open the case, another voice cut in. "Hi, Leon." Emile, the shop manager, stepped forward briskly from the office at the back. He was dressed immaculately, three-piece suit, polished shoes, and a demeanor sculpted by years of catering to wealth. His eyes flicked quickly from the man's damp clothing to the worn boots. "This gentleman might prefer to start with our essential line," Emile said, placing a firm but polite hand on Leo's shoulder. "We've just received some excellent quartz and hybrid models at very reasonable prices. Very practical pieces, excellent reliability." Leon hesitated, his eyes darting back to the man, unsure of what to say. The customer only nodded, unfazed. "I don't mind," the man said simply. "I'm not in a rush. I just wanted to understand more about the mechanics. I've heard some of these movements are entirely hand-assembled." Emile offered a tight smile. "Some are, yes. But that sort of detail isn't always what buyers are looking for." "Even so," the man replied, his voice calm but curious. "I'd like to learn." Leon noticed the shift in tone. Not defensive, not demanding, just interested, genuinely. Emile gave a small nod. "Leon will assist you. Let me know if you need anything." And just like that, he turned and walked back toward the counter, leaving Leon and the visitor alone. Leon glanced at the man again. "Sorry about that." "No need," the man replied. "He's doing his job." Leon gave a small nod, then unlocked the glass case. "These pieces," he said, lifting one gently onto a suede mat, "use what's called a tourbillon mechanism. It was invented in the 18th century to improve accuracy by offsetting the effects of gravity. The man leaned in slightly, his interest clearly piqued. Tourbillon, he repeated. And it's still relevant today? Leanne nodded. Not always necessary with modern technology, but among purists, it's like poetry in motion. The man smiled. I like that. Poetry in motion. Leon relaxed a little. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something about this visitor felt different. Not just the calmness in his voice or the way he listened, but the stillness he carried. A kind of gravity. He didn't ask for attention, but somehow the room seemed to notice him anyway. And yet, he hadn't even given his name. Leon gently rotated the display mat so the man could see the exposed gears beneath the sapphire crystal. This particular model has a skeletonized movement, he explained. That means the parts are visible through the face and caseback. Every component you see has been hand-finished. Even the bridges are deviled by hand. Keanu leaned in, eyes tracing the slow rotation of the tourbillon cage. There's something peaceful about it, he said softly, precise, like it doesn't care what's happening around it. It just keeps going. Leon smiled at the observation. Most visitors saw dollar signs or luxury. This man saw rhythm. This one, Leon continued, has a 72-hour power reserve and a twin-barrel movement. It's accurate to about 4 seconds a day, which is impressive for a mechanical timepiece. Keanu looked up, thoughtful. And that accuracy, it comes just from the mechanics. No computer inside? No battery, no chip. Just gears, levers, springs. A balance wheel oscillating hundreds of times per minute. The physics of it all. Meticulously balanced. Keanu paused. So, if you were alone on another planet and all your digital tools failed, this would still work? As long as you kept winding it? Leon's brow furrowed slightly, surprised by the remark. Yes, actually. It's self-contained, completely independent of signals or power grids. There was a long silence. The rain outside continued its gentle rhythm against the windows. The world seemed to hush for a moment. Keanu turned his eyes to the other watches in the case. You ever think about that? The idea that something so small, so quiet, could outlast everything around it? Leon looked down at the tourbillon. I've never put it quite like that, but yeah. I guess that's part of why I love this job. From behind the counter, Emile continued to watch them with faint disapproval. He was used to serving high-net-worth clients, collectors who spoke in investment terms. This quiet man in soaked boots who had asked about the soul of a watch instead of its price tag. Clearly didn't fit his expectation. Still, the visitor showed no signs of leaving. He moved slowly from case to case, asking about the process of bluing steel hands, the difference between Geneva stripes and perlage, the purpose of jewel bearings. Questions few customers had ever posed. Leon answered each one carefully. By the time they reached the rear display, the conversation had shifted into something more intimate. Shared between two people who loved craftsmanship, even if one of them was a beginner. I'm surprised, Leon said finally. Most people walk in here with a list of what's trending, but you're asking about how things are made. Keanu looked at him quietly. Because that's what matters, isn't it? The hands behind the work, the heart inside the motion. Leon blinked, unsure how to respond. Something in the man's tone carried weight. Not performance or flattery, but truth. And for the first time since he joined the shop, Leon felt like he wasn't just selling timepieces. He was sharing something older. Something sacred. Emile finally stepped forward, his smile tight. I see you're enjoying the entry-level pieces, he said, standing just behind Leon. We do have some sport models in the 10 to 15,000 range. They might suit your needs better. Leon looked up, startled. Actually, we were just discussing the movement design. But Emile had already leaned across the counter, subtly rotating the display tray back toward himself. "These collector pieces require appointments, and for serious inquiries, of course, we have our private lounge." Keanu looked at him evenly but said nothing. Emil gave a small, dismissive chuckle. "I'm sure you understand. These are very exclusive models for seasoned clients." Leon hesitated, uncertain. He could feel the atmosphere change, warmer moments cooled now by protocol and assumption. But Keanu's tone remained calm. "Tell me," he said, pointing to another piece Emil had just turned away. "Is that a perpetual calendar?" The question stopped Emil short. "Yes, one of our more complex models." "Which module do they use?" Keanu asked. "Duval Dupre." Emil narrowed his eyes slightly. "Modified, yes." "How do you—" Keanu turned back to Leon. "And the casing? I noticed some distortion in the curve. Slight, just above 6 o'clock. Is that from the domed crystal?" Leon nodded quickly. "Yes. It's a double-domed sapphire. Reduces edge distortion but creates that unique warping near the corners. You notice that?" Emil's lips pressed into a thin line. Keanu gave a faint smile. "I just like seeing how things work." The rain outside had eased into a soft mist, blurring the windows. The shop was quiet except for the hum of the overhead lights and the subtle ticking of mechanical hearts behind glass. Leon looked at the man standing beside him, drenched boots, hoodie, faint streaks of water still clinging to his sleeves, and felt something shift. Not status, not recognition, just a sense that there was more to this customer than either of them had seen. "Would you like to see the workshop?" Leon offered, his voice uncertain but hopeful. Keanu paused, then nodded. "If you have time." Emil's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. Leon led Keanu past the front displays, toward the place where the real work happened, where hands met history and tradition kept ticking, no matter who was watching. Keanu took a step closer to the lunar-phase watch, its polished case catching the soft glow of the overhead lights. He didn't look at the price tag. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, observing the layout of the subdials, the moon complication at 6 o'clock, and the tiny engraved stars around the outer track. "What makes this one tick differently?" he asked, his voice low and calm. Leon looked up from behind the counter, unsure if the man was asking about the aesthetic or the mechanics. "You mean the moon phase module?" "Yes," Keanu replied, still studying the face. "The balance of the gear ratios. It's elegant. But how do you keep it accurate to the lunar cycle without digital correction?" Leon blinked, not expecting that level of interest. Most customers just asked if the moon turned silver at night. "It's mechanically regulated," he said, stepping closer. "The phase disk advances every 24 hours, but the gearing accounts for the 29.5-day lunar cycle. So it drifts by only 1 day every, I think, 122 years. Keanu nodded slowly. "I thought so. That's brilliant engineering." Before Leon could respond, Emil appeared beside him again, inserting himself into the conversation. "This piece is just for show," he said, nudging the display case shut. "It's not really for browsing customers. May I show you something more approachable?" Leon looked uncomfortable, but Keanu simply gave a polite smile. "I'm just admiring the work." Emil gestured to a nearby case filled with simpler quartz models. "These are very precise too, and much more practical." Keanu turned his attention to Leon. "Have you ever disassembled a moon face like that?" Leon hesitated, caught between his manager's interruption and his own genuine excitement. "Only once," he admitted. "During my apprenticeship, the master let me open one for practice. It's delicate work, I imagine," Keanu said. "How long have you been apprenticing here?" 3 years, Leon answered. "Still learning every day." Keanu smiled. "That's the right mindset." Leon found himself standing a little straighter. Emil cleared his throat. "We don't usually give technical tours unless someone is making a purchase," he said, sharper now. "But if you're just curious, you're welcome to look around on your own." Keanu nodded, unfazed. "Of course." He moved quietly past the main displays, not toward the more expensive pieces, but toward a narrow case tucked into the far wall. It held older models, some vintage, others clearly never produced at scale. Watches that had character more than price tags. Watches built with imagination. One in particular caught his eye. It was asymmetrical, unlike the balanced symmetry of most Swiss designs. The case was elongated on one side, with a recessed crown and an exposed movement through a small sapphire window on the dial itself. It looked half-finished, but purposefully so. Keanu leaned in slightly. "Who designed this one?" he asked, turning again toward Leon. Leon approached, curious. "That's one of the old prototypes," he said, "from the founder's early experiments, long before the brand became a household name." Keanu kept his gaze on the strange, unfinished beauty of the watch. "It feels personal." Leon hesitated, then nodded. "It was." Keanu didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on the prototype, the subtle irregularity of its form clearly absorbing him. He leaned slightly forward, studying the movement through the dial's sapphire aperture, watching how the tiny gears turned with barely a whisper of motion. Leon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That one isn't for sale. It was made by Émile's grandfather, Henri Moreau, the original master of the house." Keanu looked at Leon, eyes thoughtful. "Is that why it's behind glass? Not because of value, but because of story?" Leon hesitated. "Honestly, I think Émile sees it as a relic. He's more focused on the new collections now. But to some of us, it's a reminder. That watch was hand-built, gear by gear, when the shop was still just a workbench above a bakery." Keanu gave a quiet smile. "I know that kind of place." Leon tilted his head. "You said you weren't a collector, but you know the mechanics. Have you worked with watches before?" Keanu looked back at the case. "Not professionally, but I've always admired the discipline, the integrity of things you can't see until you open them. Timepieces don't lie, they just tick forward, whether you notice or not." Leon nodded, the words hitting him harder than expected. "That's what Henri used to say." Behind them, Émile re-entered the room with two new customers, tourists in luxury coats. Their eyes immediately went to the collector's shelf, and Émile's demeanor shifted with practiced charm. "Ah, welcome," he greeted them with a broad smile. "This is our most exclusive line. You've come at the perfect time." Leon glanced toward them, then back to Keanu, who still stood calmly at the edge of the room, surrounded by silent elegance. "I'm sorry about earlier," Leon said in a low voice. "You asked a good question, and I shouldn't have let Émile brush you off." Keanu shook his head gently. "Don't apologize. He's protecting the business the way he knows how. I respect that." Leon frowned. "But he didn't even ask your name. You clearly care about what's behind the watches. Most people only care about what's on the outside." Keanu's eyes returned to the prototype. "Sometimes people forget that things built with love aren't always obvious." Leon followed his gaze. "That one was called the Solstice. Henri never released it. Said it was too ahead of its time." Keanu smiled faintly. "Or maybe right on time, just not for that era." Leon looked at him, genuinely curious now. "Can I ask what brought you in today? Was it just the rain?" Keanu hesitated for a moment, then replied quietly, "Not the rain exactly. I had some time. I was nearby. Thought I'd see what time looked like when it's treated with reverence." Leon let the words settle between them. They were unusual words, thoughtful. He looked again at the man standing in front of the glass, hair damp from the rain, clothes unassuming. There was something about his presence, silent but not empty, watchful, like someone who had spent time observing people more than talking to them. And then Leon noticed something odd. The man hadn't once asked about price. He hadn't glanced at the names on the walls. He hadn't looked for the prestige pieces. Just gears, movements, history. Do you know the difference between this prototype and the ones people actually buy? Keanu asked, still watching the watch. Leon shook his head. Keanu turned his eyes to him. This one tells the truth? Leon stood a little straighter. That line, "This one tells the truth," lingered in the quiet between them. He wanted to ask more, but before he could, Emil's voice cut through the room again. "Leon, a moment." Leon glanced at Keanu with an apologetic look and walked toward the main desk, where Emil was preparing an invoice for the two tourists now admiring a diamond-studded chronograph. "Do not waste time on window shoppers," Emil whispered, not bothering to hide the irritation in his tone. "That man hasn't asked for a price or a brand once. Just let him look and move on." Leon kept his face neutral. "He asked about the solstice." Emil blinked. "That old thing? He probably thought it was part of the decor." "No," Leon said, a little firmer. He knew what he was looking at. Emil exhaled through his nose, clearly not interested in the debate. "We're here to sell watches, not play history museum. Focus on real customers." Leon turned back to the gallery. Keanu was still by the glass case, but now he'd pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket, leather-bound, worn, and was jotting something down. Not prices, not notes about display models, just a few words, neatly written. Leon walked back over. "What are you writing?" Keanu glanced up, offering a small, almost amused smile. "Something my father used to say. About gears and the sky." Leon furrowed his brow. "Your father was a watchmaker?" "Not quite," Keanu replied. "But he taught me to listen to the rhythm of things. How you treat small parts, it says a lot about how you see the whole." Leon looked at the prototype again, then at the man beside him. "Would you like to see the solstice up close?" "I can open the case." Keanu paused. "Would that be allowed?" Leon glanced back toward Emil, still distracted by the other customers. "Only if we treat it with the respect it deserves." Keanu nodded. Leon reached under the counter and pulled out a key. At that moment, the rain outside grew louder against the glass windows, as if time itself were urging them forward. And with one click, the glass case unlocked. The moment of truth had begun. Leon motioned toward the glass case where the prototype rested. He hesitated for a moment, then looked at Keanu with a mix of caution and quiet pride. "My grandfather designed that one," he said softly, "before he passed." Keanu's eyes moved back to the watch, now more than a display, now a story. "Your grandfather," he repeated, interest sharpening. "Was he the founder?" Leon nodded. "Henri Lafleur. He opened this shop in 1959, built it from scratch with nothing but a bench and a dream." Keanu's gaze lingered on the prototype again. It wasn't like the other polished luxury pieces. It had a rawness to it, a soul. The face bore two rotating discs, one with Earth hours, the other, labeled in red, showed a longer cycle. "What's this second dial?" Keanu asked, his voice steady. Leon's face lit up for the first time. "Mars time," he said. "It was part of a concept my grandfather worked on in the last years of his life. A dual timepiece. One dial for Earth, one for Mars." Keanu didn't speak right away. He took a small step closer, as if the idea itself demanded reverence. "Was it ever built?" he finally asked. Leon shook his head. "Only this case prototype. No internal mechanism. Emil says it's a fantasy, a vanity piece, too niche, too complicated, but my grandfather believed in it." Keanu looked back at the young man. "Why Mars?" Leon smiled faintly, a flicker of memory behind his eyes. "He said one day humans would walk on other planets. And when they did, they'd still want to know the time. Keanu nodded, slowly. Not because they needed it, he said, but because it grounds you, keeps you tethered to where you came from. Leon looked startled. Yes, exactly. That's what he used to say. The rain outside tapped lightly against the shop window as a brief silence settled between them. Leon glanced toward the back, checking to make sure Emil wasn't listening. The truth is, he continued, most people laugh when I bring it up. They think I'm stuck in his shadow. But he was more than just a craftsman. He was a dreamer. He believed that even in space, time should feel familiar. Keanu's voice was low but certain. Sometimes, the best designs just need the right moment. Leon looked surprised by the quiet conviction in Keanu's voice. You really think so? He asked. Keanu's eyes were still fixed on the prototype. Ideas like this, they don't expire. They wait. The world just has to catch up. Leon leaned forward, encouraged. My grandfather was like that. He used to sketch concepts no one else dared to touch. Fusion balance wheels, dust-proof chambers, even gyroscopic regulators. Keanu's brow lifted slightly. And the Mars piece? This wasn't just for show? Leon smiled, but there was sadness behind it. No, it wasn't. He even calculated the soul duration, the length of a Martian day. It's about 39 minutes longer than ours. That's why the second dial is offset. He believed astronauts would need to live by 2 clocks, one for mission control back on Earth, and one for the surface of Mars. Keanu's voice softened. That takes vision. Leon nodded. He kept a notebook full of these plans. I still have it. He called the Mars concept the Red Soul Watch, said it would be part of humanity's next leap. Why didn't it go into production? Keanu asked. Leon exhaled slowly. He passed away before he could finish the engineering side. Emil thought it was a waste of time. Said no one would ever buy a watch that ran slow on purpose. That's what he called it, a slow watch. Keanu gave a faint smile. Maybe it wasn't about selling. No, it wasn't, Leon replied. It was about meaning. My grandfather always believed a true watchmaker didn't just mark time, he honored it. Outside, the rain had thinned to a quiet drizzle, and the dim light from the street reflected across the shop's glass cases. Keanu turned slightly, scanning the shop's elegant layout. It was clear the place had history, but it also bore the tension between tradition and modern indifference. Do you believe in it? Keanu asked, his tone now subtly shifted. Leon didn't answer right away. His eyes dropped to the floor, then slowly rose again. I want to, he admitted, but I've been told for years to let it go, that I should focus on marketable designs, luxury packaging, limited editions with sapphire glass and gold plating, not planetary sol systems. Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing that. Then he looked back at the Mars prototype, still sitting quietly beneath its fingerprint-smudged glass, forgotten by most who passed through. Let me ask you something, he said. If your grandfather were alive, and you told him you dropped the idea because it wasn't trendy, what do you think he'd say? Leon's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then, finally, with a small laugh and a lump in his throat, he whispered, He'd say, I never understood the point of the watch. Keanu's voice was gentle. Then, maybe it's time someone did. Leon turned away for a moment, brushing the edge of the glass case with his fingertips. Then, quietly, he said, Wait here. He disappeared into the back room. Keanu stood in silence, the ticking of the shop's central regulator clock the only sound. After a minute, Leon returned, holding a thin, leather-bound notebook. Its cover was worn at the edges, and the corners were curled slightly from years of use. He opened it slowly, revealing pages filled with hand-drawn diagrams, gears layered with annotations, planetary charts beside movement blueprints, formulas scribbled between sketches of domed Mars habitats and astronaut suits. Keanu stepped closer as Leon turned the pages. "He worked on this almost every night for the last 10 years of his life," Leon said. "He believed one day someone would need this." Keanu studied the detailed sketches. The design wasn't just conceptual, it was purposeful. Every adjustment in the gearing, every ratio was calculated to compensate for Martian gravity, time dilation, and thermal variance. Leon flipped to a page marked by a faded red ribbon. "This was his favorite spread," he said. He called it the heartbeat of the mission. It showed a split dial movement, one side marked in Earth time, the other gradually shifting to Mars time, with a central complication that synced both. Beneath it was written in looping cursive, "To measure two worlds, one heartbeat at a time." Keanu read the line aloud. Then, for a long moment, he said nothing. Leon closed the notebook gently. "I tried showing this to Emil once. He didn't even finish the first page. Said it was charming but naive, that no one cared about mechanical watches anymore, let alone ones made for astronauts." Keanu's eyes lingered on the closed cover. "Then maybe they need reminding." Leon looked surprised. "Reminding? That beauty still matters," Keanu replied. "That precision means something. That stories, especially stories that connect generations, don't expire." A silence settled between them. Then Keanu looked back at the dusty case. "You ever think about building it? Even just once? Not to sell it, just to prove it works?" Leon hesitated. "All the time." "Then maybe that's where you start," Keanu said. "You build it. Quietly. Let the piece speak for itself." Leon's voice was low. "What if no one ever sees it?" Keanu gave the smallest smile. "Sometimes the right person does." Leon stood still for a moment, notebook in hand, the words hanging between them like something more than suggestion. He looked at the prototype again. Then, finally, with quiet resolve, he nodded. "Maybe it's time." Keanu gently tapped the glass case once. "Maybe it is." The rain outside softened into a mist, but the tension inside the boutique thickened. Keanu remained by the glass case, quietly admiring the lunar-phase watch he had asked about. He studied its dial, the placement of the stars, the crescent arc that would slowly reveal the moon's shape. His posture was relaxed, almost meditative. But his questions had grown more technical. About the joule count in the movement, the torque ratios, and the escapement stability during temperature fluctuations. Leon answered as best as he could, occasionally fumbling for the right terms. But his enthusiasm never faltered. Emil, however, had grown increasingly tense. He stood a few paces away, arms folded, eyes narrowing with each new question Keanu posed. "Excuse me," Emil finally interrupted, stepping between Keanu and the case. "May I ask, are you planning to make a purchase today, or?" Keanu looked up calmly. "No, I'm just really interested in the mechanics behind these pieces." Emil offered a tight smile. "Ah, I see. Well, we do have a few introductory models in the back. If you're curious about basic construction, I can ask someone to bring those out." Leon turned his head sharply. "But he's asking about the lunar phase complication. That's not something you see in entry-level models." Emil's jaw tightened. "Yes, but there's a reason those pieces are in the collector's section." Before Keanu could respond, the entrance bell chimed. A wealthy-looking couple swept into the boutique, the man wrapped in a tailored charcoal coat, the woman draped in a white cashmere shawl. They glanced around with the air of people used to being served quickly. Instantly, Emil's entire demeanor shifted. His smile widened, his voice softened, and he approached them with open arms. "Welcome," he said, ushering them past Keanu as if he were a coat rack. "I have just the pieces you'll love. Right this way. Limited editions, platinum casings, just arrived last week." Keanu stepped back to give them space, but Leon's cheeks flushed. He looked between his manager and the man he'd been speaking with, his stomach sinking. The contrast was stark. Emile had all but dismissed Keanu the moment he entered, and now he was practically bowing for the new couple. "Would you like to see anything else?" Leon asked Keanu, voice quiet. Keanu smiled faintly. "No pressure. I'm just here to learn." Leon nodded, but his jaw remained clenched. "You ask good questions, stuff most people don't care about anymore." Keanu's eyes returned to the glass display, where the master's prototype still sat quietly under the lighting. Maybe that's what makes them matter more. From across the room, Emile glanced back. Noticing Keanu still lingering near the collector's case, he returned, this time wearing a polite expression laced with irritation. "I'm afraid these pieces aren't for casual inspection," he said smoothly. "They're extremely rare and priced accordingly. Perhaps something more accessible would suit your budget?" There was no cruelty in Keanu's response, only a softness that felt out of place in the tension-filled air. "It's okay," he said, eyes still on the prototype. "I'm just here to learn." Leon swallowed hard. Something about this man was different, not because of his clothes or his silence, but because, despite being ignored and underestimated, he didn't flinch. He looked at the watches like they were poetry. Emile turned his attention back to the wealthy couple, eager to show them a platinum tourbillon that had just arrived from Basel. As he walked away, Leon and Keanu remained near the edge of the collector's section. The shop had fallen into a familiar rhythm of hushed admiration and polished presentations, except in the quiet pocket where the stranger in a damp hoodie stood, asking questions no one else ever asked. Leon bent slightly to glance again at the old prototype watch behind the glass. He couldn't explain it, but something in Keanu's expression gave him pause. The curiosity wasn't shallow or performative. It was as if he could see beyond the dial, into the very soul of the mechanism. "You said you're just here to learn," Leon said, hesitating. "Have you always been interested in watches?" Keanu nodded. "Since I was a kid. I was fascinated by how something so small could keep track of something so vast." Leon cracked a half-mile. "That's exactly what my grandfather used to say. He said good watchmakers aren't obsessed with time, they're obsessed with honoring it." Keanu's face lit up at that. "Sounds like a wise man." Leon's voice lowered. "He was. He built this shop with his bare hands after the war, designed over 50 unique complications in his lifetime. Most of them never made it into production. Too unusual, too ambitious. One of them was a dual timekeeping concept, for Earth and Mars." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Mars?" Leon nodded, glancing to make sure Emile was still preoccupied. "Yeah. He called it the Martian Eclipse Project, back in the 90s. Said we'd need it one day." "And did anyone ever try to build it?" Leon exhaled. "Only on paper. The specs were impossible at the time. The gear ratios alone were ridiculous. No one took it seriously, not even my dad. When grandfather passed, most of his designs were boxed away. Emile says it's a waste of resources to dig into them. Says we should stick to what sells." Keanu's gaze remained steady on the prototype watch. "But you didn't think it was a waste?" Leon hesitated, then shook his head. "No, I think the Martian eclipse was ahead of its time. I've been reading through the old notebooks, even mocked up some 3D models. But they're just dreams, you know? No one's going to fund a space watch designed by an apprentice." There was no pity in Keanu's expression, only a quiet kind of understanding. He looked again at the old watch behind the glass, its worn leather band and slightly scratched crystal, a stark contrast to the polished showroom around it. "Sometimes," Keanu said softly, "the best designs just need the right moment." Leon looked at him, puzzled by the certainty in his tone. Across the room, Emile laughed a little too loudly at a joke from the visiting couple. The sound felt out of place, jarring against the stillness between Leon and Keanu. Leon folded his arms, eyes drifting back to the prototype. Funny thing is, I think he believed someone would come along one day who could actually build it. Keanu didn't say anything right away. He just kept looking at the prototype, his hands still in his jacket pockets, and something in his stillness made Leon wonder who exactly this man was and why he cared so much. At that moment, Emile returned with the couple in tow. He spotted Keanu still near the collector's case and gave a tight, dismissive smile. "I'm afraid these are collector's items," Emile said firmly, standing between Keanu and the glass. "Perhaps something more accessible would suit your budget." Keanu nodded gently, unfazed. "It's okay," he replied, voice calm. "I'm just here to learn." Leon said nothing, but he watched them both and began to see everything differently. Leon hesitated for a second before moving to the display case. The rain outside still tapped gently against the windows, casting soft shadows across the glass shelves. He unlocked the case slowly, careful not to smudge the polished wood as he lifted the panel and reached inside. Keanu watched quietly, his hands folded in front of him, eyes fixed on the rare piece resting under the warm lights. "This one's different," Leon said as he gently placed the watch on the velvet mat between them. "Not just because it's old or expensive. Look closer. The dial. See that texture? That's real lunar regolith. Moon dust, they call it." Keanu leaned in, gaze sharpened. The dark gray particles embedded into the dial weren't glittering like diamonds or shimmering like mother of pearl. They had a muted roughness, like something ancient and quiet. His fingers didn't touch the glass, but his admiration was evident. "From the Apollo missions?" he asked. Leon nodded. "Sourced legally, from a fragment retrieved in the 1970s. Not much of it exists in the private sector anymore. Just a few grams were allocated for experimental design, and only 3 prototypes were ever made with this batch." Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying the lugs, the movement depth, the weight distribution in the casing. "And it still keeps accurate time?" "Down to the second," Leon replied. "The casing was specially designed for temperature swings. Titanium shell, internal suspension system, that's why it hasn't warped or cracked under stress. Most collectors don't understand why the materials matter. They just want the rarity. But the tolerances," Keanu said, half to himself, "they must have recalibrated the balance wheel to offset thermal creep. Lunar regolith's density isn't uniform, especially after atmospheric exposure." Leon blinked. "Wait, you know about thermal creep?" Keanu smiled lightly. "I've read a bit. It's fascinating how space materials behave differently under Earth's physics. Expansion coefficients, microfracture risks. It's all in the math, but there's also an art to it." For a moment, Leon just stared at him, his usual self-confidence visibly giving way to something closer to respect. "You're not an ordinary customer." Keanu shrugged, still admiring the watch. "No, I guess not. I just like understanding things that last." Leon smiled slowly, then sat down across from him. "Honestly, most people who walk in here just want to show off. You're the first person I've met who asked about thermal resistance." Keanu looked up. "Is it your design?" Leon shook his head. "No. My grandfather started it. I helped refine the casing in school, but it never went into mass production. Emile said it was too niche, too strange to market." "Sometimes," Keanu said quietly, "what's strange is exactly what we'll need someday." There was silence again as the watch rested between them, timeless and steady. Keanu finally asked, "How much?" Leon hesitated. With the lunar regolith, prototype status and rarity, it's not priced for display, but unofficially, around 600,000 francs. Keanu didn't flinch. He simply gave a soft nod, like he had expected as much. And the internal movement? Hand-finished 24-joule dual XAS gyroscopic balance, designed for resilience over perfection. We were testing ideas for a Mars-compatible model before that was considered practical. Keanu leaned back slightly, and his eyes softened. Mars, huh? He looked at the dial again. Well, every journey begins with knowing what time it is. Leon was still watching him with that curious glint in his eye, the kind usually reserved for experts or people who asked the kinds of questions only insiders knew to ask. He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly, as if inviting Keanu into a quiet circle of trust. My grandfather always said that time behaves differently depending on how we treat it, Leon said. That's why he wanted to build watches for different environments, ones where time feels heavier or lighter. Space was the ultimate test. Keanu nodded, eyes still on the dial. Out there, there's no atmosphere to buffer reality. Every second matters. There's no room for error. That's exactly what he used to say, Leon murmured. Most people laughed at him, even Emil did. He said no one would ever need a timepiece built for Mars, that it was a waste of design hours. Keanu lifted his gaze slowly. But your grandfather built it anyway? Leon smiled faintly. He started the work. But the original Mars prototype was never completed, just sketches. A few parts still tucked in a drawer somewhere, I think. He passed away before he could finish it. Do you still believe in it? Keanu asked gently. Leon hesitated. I used to. When I was younger, it felt like a calling, like I was supposed to finish what he started. But people here, they like predictability, tradition. Collectors want beauty, not challenge. I stopped bringing it up. Keanu leaned back slightly, his fingers resting lightly on the counter's edge. There's nothing wrong with tradition, he said, voice quiet. But sometimes tradition is just a seed, and it's waiting for someone to risk planting it in new ground. Leon looked down at the moon dust watch. Maybe. Keanu's next words were soft, but intentional. Your grandfather didn't build that for status. He built it for the future. For a long moment, they just looked at the watch. The rain outside had slowed, but the clouds hadn't lifted. The city was quiet, the air holding the soft tension of a moment that might matter. Leon finally asked, Are you an engineer? Keanu laughed lightly, shaking his head. No, just a student of detail. And someone who respects when something is built with care. That's rare, Leon said. I've been lucky to learn from a few who knew what it meant. Emil reappeared around the corner just as Leon was starting to relax. His eyes flicked to the open display case and the watch resting on the mat. His smile tightened. I see we're handling prototypes now, he said dryly. Leon tensed. He asked to see it, and I'm sure he'll enjoy seeing something more appropriate next. This piece isn't for casual browsing. Keanu stood slowly. It's all right. I was just curious. Curiosity doesn't always come with a price tag. Emil offered a polite but forced smile. Of course, but timepieces like these require more than interest. Keanu didn't push back. He only nodded once, eyes lingering on the moon dust dial. Sometimes the rarest pieces are the ones nobody understands until they're needed. Leon glanced at him, eyes wide, then looked back down at the watch with renewed thoughtfulness. Keanu gave him a subtle nod and stepped away from the counter, hands still in his jacket pockets. As he walked toward the door, Keanu paused and turned back to Leon. What's the price? He asked softly. Leon hesitated, then answered. The store had quieted, the rhythm of the rain against the windows, now the only sound filling the moment between Keanu's calm words and Emil's stunned silence. I'd like to purchase it, Keanu said, gesturing gently toward the lunar watch, still cradled in Leon's gloved hands. Emil blinked, his posture stiffening, as if the phrase had short-circuited something in his brain. "Excuse me?" he asked, half laughing, glancing back and forth between Keanu and the display case. "Sir, this particular piece, perhaps I didn't mention, is valued well over 85,000 francs. Keanu offered a small nod. "That's all right." Emil's tone sharpened slightly, his voice still laced with disbelief. "It's not exactly an impulse purchase. Maybe we can show you something." But Keanu had already reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a sleek, matte black wallet and opened it with the same quiet confidence that had defined his entire presence. From it, he withdrew a black card with silver letters, subtle but unmistakable. The weight of it alone seemed to silence the air. And then, along with the card, he handed over a slim ID card. Leon saw it first. His eyes widened before any words could leave his lips. He looked up, then down again, as if he had misread what he was seeing. But no, the name was printed clearly. The photograph confirmed it. Emil took both items with a skeptical smirk, until his gaze landed on the name. His jaw locked mid-sentence. For a full 2 seconds, he didn't speak. Then, like air being let out of a tire, his mouth parted slightly, and he exhaled without words. "You're," he stammered, looking up at Keanu's face again, this time truly seeing it, not just the rain-dampened hoodie or quiet demeanor. "You're..." Keanu lifted one hand with a gentle wave, a small smile forming at the corner of his mouth. "Please," he said softly, "just Keanu." Emil stood frozen, still holding the black card as though it might burn him. The carefully maintained performance of superiority on his face had cracked, and now it gave way to something resembling panic. Leon stood a few feet away, nearly speechless. His hand still hovered near the case, the lunar watch untouched in the red velvet tray. I had no idea," he said quietly. Keanu smiled again, this time warmer. "That's okay. Neither did I, once." In that moment, the entrance bell chimed. A young delivery woman stepped in, her coat soaked from the downpour outside. She carried a package, wrapped tightly against the rain, and had earbuds tucked loosely around her neck. She stopped mid-step as her eyes met Keanu's. She stared, blinked, then blinked again. "Wait. Oh my God, are you..." she gasped, dropping the earbuds. "You're Keanu Reeves." Emil turned toward her with a forced smile, hoping to regain some control. But she ignored him, eyes only on the man she now recognized from countless films. Could I get a picture?" she asked, breathlessly. Keanu gave a soft laugh. "Sure." He stepped gently beside her, and she pulled out her phone, hands trembling slightly as she framed the shot. Leon moved quietly around the counter and took the photo for her. The flash clicked. She grinned and whispered, "My brother's not going to believe this." Keanu thanked her with a quiet nod as she exited into the rain, her package now secondary to the story she'd just lived. The room stood still once more. Emil cleared his throat, still clutching the card, trying to recover his poise. I apologize if I seemed, unaware." Keanu didn't respond right away. He turned slightly, his eyes now resting on the lunar watch, still glinting under the soft glass lighting. "I wasn't here to be recognized," he said. "I was here to learn." Leon glanced at Emil, then back at Keanu. Something unspoken passed between them, a sense that maybe this day was about more than a watch. Emil cleared his throat again, more forcefully this time, as if the sound alone might reset the hierarchy of the room. He returned Keanu's card and ID with careful precision, like handing over fragile glass. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. We'd be honored to process your purchase." Keanu took them back without comment and nodded toward Leon. "He's the one who walked me through it. I'd like him to handle the sale." Leon looked up, startled. "You know more than you realize," Keanu said, voice low but encouraging. "And you listen." Emil forced a tight-lipped smile, but said nothing. He stepped aside, face pale, watching Leon walk behind the counter. With the velvet tray in his hands, for the first time, Leon moved with the confidence of someone who felt trusted. He retrieved the certificate of authenticity, the service papers, and the protective casing from the vault drawer. His hands were steady now. The watch is reference number 222 ML, the last in a series of 6 made with crushed lunar rock particles in the dial. Each particle was tested by a third-party lab and verified to be from the Apollo recovery batch. This particular one also includes the meteorite fragment certification from the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. Keanu smiled. "You've memorized a lot." "It's kind of a dream watch," Leon admitted quietly. Keanu glanced at it once more before handing over the card. "Let's make it official." As Leon processed the payment, Emil hovered nearby, trying to reclaim relevance. "This is a very special piece," he added. "Most collectors only see it in catalogs." Keanu nodded, but didn't respond. His focus remained on Leon, who was carefully packaging the watch in its deep blue casing, layering it with silk padding and enclosing the lunar dust certificate in a small inner compartment. The terminal beeped. "Approved." Leon printed the receipt and handed it over, eyes wide with disbelief. "It's yours," he said, almost reverently. Keanu studied the watch one last time before closing the box. "I'm not sure I'll wear it every day," he said with a faint smile, "but I'll keep it close." There was an awkward pause until Keanu looked up at Emil. "You know, sometimes it's not about who walks through the door. It's about what you're willing to see." Emil stiffened. "Of course. We always aim to provide excellent service to all our customers." Leon's face twitched, just slightly, but he remained silent. The door opened again. This time, a middle-aged man entered with a casual jacket and a travel bag slung over one shoulder. He froze mid-step as his eyes caught the man standing at the center of the room. "Is that?" he whispered. Keanu turned and gave a small wave. The man's eyes lit up. "My wife's not going to believe this. I'm just here to get my grandfather's watch serviced." Keanu gestured toward Leon. "You're in good hands." The man beamed and walked up to the counter, still stealing glances over his shoulder. As Keanu stepped toward the exit, he paused beside Leon. "One day," he said, "that Mars design of your grandfather's, someone's going to bring it to life. Maybe it'll be you." Leon blinked, caught between disbelief and inspiration. "Just keep listening to the quiet details," Keanu added. "That's where the good stuff is." And then, without fanfare, he left. The chime over the door rang softly as the rain continued outside. Leon stood behind the counter, holding the empty tray. In his chest, something had shifted, not just from the recognition, but from the affirmation that what he cared about, what he believed in, mattered, even if no one else had noticed. Until now. Leon hesitated at first, unsure if Keanu was serious. But something in the quiet sincerity of his expression, curious, grounded, and without the faintest trace of arrogance, gave him the courage to act. He moved to the back cabinet where a leather-bound notebook sat, aged and fraying at the edges. It was wrapped in a piece of cloth that had belonged to his grandfather, stitched with initials no one remembered but him. "This is it," Leon said, setting the notebook gently on the glass counter. "It's not much, just sketches and a few ideas my grandfather never got to build. He used to call it his mad dream." Keanu leaned in without a word, his focus total. As Leon opened the book, page after page revealed technical illustrations, delicate hand-drawn schematics of complex gears, miniature counterweights, and an unfamiliar double-dial layout. One dial was labeled Terra, the other simply said Aries. Beneath the labels, notations in precise cursive listed minute tolerances, temperature adjustments, and radiation shielding theories. It wasn't science fiction. It was serious, obsessive engineering, written decades before anyone seriously imagined a human colony on Mars. Keanu's eyes didn't just skim, he read. He absorbed. After several long minutes, he finally spoke. "This isn't just a watch," he said, running his fingers along the edges of the page. "This is a story of someone who believed in the impossible long before anyone else did." Leon stood quiet, watching Keanu treat the notebook like it was sacred. "I always thought it was too ambitious," he admitted. "Even now, people say mechanical watches are outdated. This one's designed for a planet we haven't even reached." Keanu looked up, his gaze steady. "That's exactly why it matters." Leon gave a nervous chuckle. "What are we supposed to do with it? No one's building watches for Mars." Keanu smiled faintly. "Not yet." There was a pause. Keanu flipped to another page, showing a pressure-tolerant casing sealed with a synthetic crystal dome. He tapped the sketch gently. "Would you ever consider showing this to someone at NASA?" Leon blinked. "NASA?" Keanu nodded. "I know someone, an engineer at JPL." Leon stared at him, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "You know someone at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory?" he asked, still holding the notebook in both hands. Keanu nodded, calm as ever. "Yeah. She's a systems specialist for off-girl mission design. We've talked about timekeeping challenges before. The latency differences, the planetary soul rotation, how current clocks don't translate intuitively to Martian cycles. Your grandfather was ahead of all of us." Leon opened his mouth, then closed it again. The idea seemed too big to process. "I mean, even if the idea is good, would anyone actually care? This was never built, it's just paper." Keanu leaned forward. "Every great mission starts with paper, with someone daring to imagine something that doesn't exist yet. You said your grandfather called it a mad dream, but mad dreams are the ones that change everything." Leon looked down at the pages again. He'd grown up around them. Sketches his grandfather would revisit in his free time, even in his final years. Some were smudged from ink that never dried properly. Others had notes scrawled over technical diagrams, more philosophy than function. Phrases like "carry Earth with you" and "our hearts remember where we come from" appeared in the margins like whispers from another time. "I always thought it was kind of poetic," Leon said quietly. He believed that, even on Mars, we'd still want to feel Earth's rhythm. That we'd still want to feel like we belonged to both places. Keanu nodded. "Exactly. It's not just engineering, it's connection." Leon finally smiled, though it was laced with disbelief. "If I send her these sketches, she'll probably laugh." "She won't," Keanu said. "She respects legacy. She works with tools made by people who've never set foot in space. And she knows that sometimes the oldest techniques solve the newest problems." There was a long silence. Then Leon asked softly, "Would you really introduce me?" Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim black notebook of his own. He flipped it open, tore out a page, and jotted down a name, an email, and a note. "Mars horology concept. Please read every page." He handed it to Leon. "Tell her I sent you, and tell her this watch deserves to be built." Leon took the note with both hands, staring at it as if it were something sacred. His fingers trembled slightly, and for a moment, he couldn't bring himself to speak. I don't know what to say," he whispered. Keanu gave a small smile. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just don't let this stay buried in a notebook." Leon nodded slowly, folding the pages of his grandfather's sketches closed like something precious, like an heirloom finally waking up. The shop was quiet now. Outside, the rain had stopped. A faint beam of sunlight streamed through the tall window panes and caught the edge of the lunar dust display, casting a faint shimmer across the glass. As Leon tucked the notebook under his arm, he glanced again at the empty stand where the moon watch had been just hours before. "You really bought that piece, just like that. It spoke to me," Keanu said simply. "I've always had a soft spot for things that carry stories." "And this?" Leon asked, tapping the cover of his notebook. "Do you really think it has a chance?" "I think it has more than a chance," Keanu replied. "I think it's needed." Leon swallowed hard, trying to absorb what was happening. The afternoon had begun like any other. A quiet shift, a rainy day, a customer in a hoodie. And now? He was holding an introduction to NASA, sketches from a man the world had forgotten, and the encouragement of someone who saw beyond appearances. Keanu glanced at the antique clock on the wall. "I've got to head out soon, but can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you still believe in what your grandfather believed?" Leon hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't, until today." Keanu's gaze was steady but kind. "Then don't stop now. Some people measure time, others shape it." With that, he turned, heading for the door as quietly as he had arrived. As it closed behind him with a soft chime, Leon stood alone in the quiet shop, the echoes of his grandfather's dreams and Keanu's words settling around him like the ticking of a distant clock. The rain had stopped by nightfall, but the streets of Geneva still glistened under the amber glow of the streetlights. Keanu sat by the small writing desk in his quiet hotel room, a notebook open in front of him. His fingertips brushed over the smooth paper, as if trying to summon the right words before he even picked up the pen. In front of him, the sketch of the Mars watch lay open. 2 concentric dials, Earth and Mars, time-aligned like twin heartbeats. It wasn't just beautiful, it was visionary. And yet, it had sat unnoticed for decades, gathering dust in a forgotten notebook, waiting for someone to believe in it again. Keanu took a deep breath. Then he began to write. "To the master who once dreamed of time beyond Earth. I never met you. And yet, today I walked through the doors of your world. I saw the cases you once filled, the tools you once held. I met your grandson. And I saw something in his eyes that must have once lived in yours. This quiet fire, this reverence for what a simple gear and spring could mean to the soul of a person. I'm writing because I think you'd want to know something. Your designs, they're not forgotten. One in particular made me stop cold. A watch meant to tell time not just here on Earth, but on another world, Mars. People would laugh at that, say it's fiction. But I didn't laugh." Keanu paused, tapping the pen gently. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the travel clock on the nightstand. He thought of Leon, how he had stood that afternoon, with uncertainty in his voice but a stubborn flicker of belief in his hands. He kept writing. "You didn't just build timepieces. You built questions. You asked, what if? You carved legacy into metal and glass even when others couldn't see it. That's not just craftsmanship. That's courage. And your grandson, he thinks he's alone in carrying that torch. He's not anymore." Keanu set the pen down for a moment and looked out the window. The clouds had cleared, and the moon hung over Geneva like a quiet promise. He imagined the moon dust embedded in the watch dial he now carried in a box beside him, a piece of something ancient and unreachable, worn on the wrist as if it belonged to the human story all along. He picked the pen up again and continued writing. There's something strange about time, isn't there? We think it moves in one direction, forward, always forward, but sometimes it folds back on itself. Sometimes the hands of a clock point us toward someone we never met, toward a purpose we never expected. Your Mars sketch was one of those moments. When I saw it, I didn't see fantasy. I saw a blueprint of hope, of what humanity could be if we kept believing, even when the world told us to stop. I don't know what made you draw it. Maybe you saw the stars in a way the rest of us hadn't yet learned to. Maybe you believed that telling time wasn't just a science, but a story that had to be carried across generations. Well, it reached me, and I believe. He stopped again, letting the ink dry as he flipped back through the sketches Leon had shown him earlier. Some were rough, hastily drawn. Others were meticulous, labeled with forgotten formulas and material specifications. It was more than just engineering, it was philosophy, an invitation to imagine what it would mean to measure time in an alien sky. Keanu leaned forward and began the final stretch of the letter, his handwriting slower now, more deliberate. You built something with your hands, and like all things made with care, it carried a piece of you. Your grandson still hears that echo. He doubts himself, but I don't. What he carries isn't broken tradition, it's living memory, and he'll make something extraordinary out of it. I'm not a watchmaker, I'm not a scientist, but I know reverence when I see it. I know when something deserves to be passed forward. He signed the letter simply, with deep respect. Keanu. Then he folded the paper in thirds, smoothing the creases like it was something fragile. He tucked it gently beneath the open Mars notebook, not beside it, but under it, like a foundation meant to hold something up. And then he took out a blank card, scrawled 2 words, and placed it carefully on top. Keep going. The next morning, Leon arrived early at the shop, just as the city was beginning to wake. The shutters still cast shadows on the floor, and the scent of fresh polish lingered in the quiet air. He walked past the glass displays, half expecting the night to have been a dream. But on the workbench, where the Mars sketchbook had been left open, something new caught his eye. The folded letter, and on top of it, a card that read, "Keep going." Leon hesitated, then reached for the paper beneath. As he unfolded it and began to read, his breath caught in his throat. Each word felt like a voice from 2 lifetimes ago, his grandfather's dreams, somehow answered by a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. By the time he reached the final line, his hands were trembling. He held the letter to his chest, eyes stinging. All the doubts, the quiet dismissals, the years of feeling unseen, melted beneath the weight of that handwritten note. He sat there in silence, the morning sun just beginning to filter through the shop window, illuminating the sketchbook and the letter side by side. For the first time in years, Leon believed, truly believed. The rain had stopped days ago, but Leon still felt as though something was washing over his life, cleansing it, changing it. The shop had returned to its usual rhythm. Tourists filtered in, guided by glossy brochures. Collectors arrived with briefcases and contracts. Emil had resumed his careful routines, never mentioning what had happened that day with Keanu Reeves, but Leon noticed the shift. Emil didn't hover as much. He no longer intercepted Leon's conversations with customers, and every now and then Leon caught the older man watching him, not with suspicion, but with something closer to quiet reflection. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Keanu's visit. The sketches were still in their original notebook, carefully tucked into Leon's satchel. Every night he'd open them, run his fingers along the edges of the paper, and remember how Keanu had looked at them, not with polite interest, but with wonder, with belief, and most of all, with respect. Then one afternoon, just as the last bell above the shop door jingled closed, the phone on the back counter rang. Leon had to fumble with the receiver. Hardly anyone used the landline anymore. "Tourbillon timepieces," he answered. A pause. Then a warm American voice came through. "Is this Leon?" He hesitated. "Yes, speaking. My name is Derek Linwood. I'm a materials consultant with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Leon blinked. His fingers tightened on the receiver. "NASA?" "Yes," Derek said with a slight chuckle. "I believe we have a mutual friend. Mr. Reeves forwarded me some design sketches you created. Dual planetary timekeeping systems. I just finished reviewing them with one of our mechanical engineers. Leon was silent for a moment, his mind racing. He sent them? Keanu, actually, he couldn't finish the sentence. He did, Derek confirmed. He said, and I'm quoting, "This kid has vision and guts." Lee's heart thundered in his chest. "I'd like to talk to you more about your concept," Derek continued. "Specifically, your planetary compensation mechanism for time dilation and atmospheric temperature shifts. Are you available for a video call tomorrow? Our team has some questions." Leon's breath caught. Yes, absolutely. Great, Derek said, his tone brightening. "I'll email the details. One more thing, did you come up with these designs yourself?" Leon hesitated. "They're based on concepts my grandfather started decades ago. I just reimagined them." "Well, Mr. Beaufort," Derek said, "we think you might be onto something." The call ended. Leon stood frozen in the back room, phone still in hand. He looked at the clock on the wall. For the first time in years, it felt like time was on his side. The next morning, Leon arrived at the shop earlier than usual. He had barely slept, but he didn't feel tired. There was too much adrenaline, too much possibility crackling beneath the surface. He wore his cleanest shirt, brushed his hair twice, and made sure his grandfather's old sketches were carefully arranged on the work table in the back office, just in case the call required him to explain in detail. At exactly 9, his laptop chimed. The NASA logo filled the screen, followed by 3 small squares as engineers joined the call. Derek introduced the team, an orbital physicist, a time systems specialist, and a structural materials engineer. They weren't stiff or overly formal. In fact, they seemed excited. One of them, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, leaned forward and said, "Where did you learn to think like this?" Leon could only shrug. "I didn't. I just listened to my grandfather, and I kept sketching." They asked questions about the materials he imagined using, about the balance wheel insulation, about how he anticipated regulating Earth-Mars synchronization in conditions where electricity wasn't always stable. Leon answered as best as he could. Some answers were incomplete, others instinctive. But the team didn't judge him. Instead, they asked for more. By the time the call ended, Derek said, "We'd like to include you as a contributor on a feasibility white paper we're preparing. You won't be alone. We'll pair you with someone from our legacy time systems team. But your Mars dial framework is genuinely innovative, and frankly, it's been a while since someone outside our circle surprised us." Leon's voice nearly broke. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll keep building," Derek replied. "People like you keep this whole thing moving forward." Leon sat for a long time after the call ended, staring at his laptop, his heart still racing. Then he stood and walked to the front of the shop. The bell jingled overhead. Emile was there, polishing a glass case, but he looked up when he saw Leon. "You're in early," Emile said casually. Leon didn't respond right away. He just smiled faintly and walked behind the counter. A few moments passed in silence before Emile spoke again, more quietly. "Leon, about the other day." Leon glanced up. Emile was unusually subdued. "I misjudged him. And I misjudged you." The words hung in the air. Emile rarely apologized, not directly. "I've seen a lot of people come through here," he continued. "People who bluff, who pretend, who ask questions to sound smart. I thought he was one of them. And I assumed you were just playing along." Leon didn't reply. "But I was wrong," Emile added. "You saw something. You always have." Leon considered his next words carefully. "We all want to feel like what we're doing matters, like it'll outlast us." Emile nodded, his eyes dropping to the case of traditional tourbillons. "I used to believe that too." Leon let that settle before he said, "I think it still can." A quiet understanding passed between them. 2 generations bound by gears, glass, and something more fragile. Then, with his voice steady and clear, Leon said, "I'm submitting the Mars prototype, officially, with Keanu listed as a co-sponsor." And this time, Emil didn't argue. He only nodded once. "Then, I hope the stars align for you." Leon's phone buzzed again. Another email from a Tokyo tech journal requesting a feature interview. It was barely dawn in Geneva, but the shop's inbox had been overflowing ever since the announcement. NASA had greenlit the first research phase of the Mars Timekeeper initiative. Overnight, the tiny watch shop had become the center of a global conversation. He stood at the front window, coffee in hand, watching the morning rain trail down the glass. The world outside looked the same, but everything inside had shifted. Behind him, the workshop hummed softly, tools where they'd always been, sunlight warming the counter. But now there was a new table in the back, a dedicated space for prototyping, data sheets from Jet Propulsion Laboratory scattered beside brass gears and moon-phase modules. Leon stepped inside, the scent of oil and wood polish grounding him. This was still his grandfather's shop, but it was also something more now. A bridge between planets. A symbol that tradition and innovation didn't have to be enemies. Later that morning, a delivery arrived, a package from Los Angeles. Inside, schematics from Keanu's engineering contact and a note. "These are the JPL specs. Start dreaming." Leon pinned the pages beside the original Mars sketch. The dual-dial concept his grandfather imagined decades ago suddenly had a life beyond paper. NASA's material engineers were interested. They had asked for full environmental testing with simulation labs in California, and they wanted Leon involved directly. By noon, journalists began calling. International orders flooded in, many asking for the Mars Timekeeper or for watches built by the apprentice who dared to dream. The name stuck. Even Emil used it, though quietly. Keanu had arranged for Leon to work remotely with the team from Geneva while preparing for a temporary relocation to LA. The arrangement was modest, not glamorous, but it was real. The kind of opportunity people waited a lifetime for. He would split his time between here and there, Earth and Mars, past and future. That afternoon, a young girl entered the shop with her father. Her eyes wandered to the display case, where the Mars Timekeeper prototype sat under carefully adjusted lighting. She tugged her father's sleeve. "That's the one that goes to space," she whispered. Leon knelt beside her and smiled. "And maybe one day you will too." The girl beamed. Her father mouthed a quiet, "Thank you." After they left, Leon looked around the shop once more. It had not changed in form, but in spirit. The counters still shone with their worn edges. The air still carried hints of metal and lacquer. But now, there was something else. A quiet energy. The kind that happens when history is not just preserved, but awakened. From the shadows, Emil watched without speaking. He no longer questioned Leon's path. He no longer tried to guide it. For the first time in years, the shop felt alive. And at the center of it all stood an apprentice who had once doubted his place, now shaping time across worlds. The glass walls of the European Space Agency's test facility glimmered under a slate-gray sky as engineers moved quietly in the control room. Inside the sealed chamber beyond, the first fully realized Mars Timekeeper prototype sat alone on a custom mount, its polished casing reflecting the glow of simulated Martian sun. Every eye in the observation room was on the single watch, no bigger than a child's palm, yet representing thousands of hours of work across 2 continents. Leon stood near the back, fingers clenched nervously around the edge of his notepad. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew the specs. He knew the results from internal stress tests and tolerances. Still, this was different. This was real. The air inside the chamber was now being evacuated. In the far corner, temperature gauges began their descent into the red. -40 degrees Celsius and falling. Keanu stood beside him, dressed as always in quiet tones. Dark jacket, boots, a neutral expression that gave little away. He hadn't said much since they arrived. That was his way. He was here not for attention, but for belief. Leon hadn't expected him to fly out for the test, and yet there he was, unannounced and calm, standing at the edge of history like it was a familiar place. In the chamber, red dust swirled as pressurized air simulated violent Martian winds. The prototype's second hand ticked without pause, resisting the storm. A technician spoke into the headset. "Dust integrity stable. No breach in casing seal." Another called out. "Internal movement maintaining accuracy. Loss under 0.02 seconds per hour." Leon let out the breath he didn't know he was holding. The head engineer turned toward them. "Preliminary verdict. The Mars timekeeper is a success." Applause erupted around the room, but Leon didn't move. He just stared at the tiny device sitting in the tempest of simulated Mars, his grandfather's dream alive at last. After the test, a modest unveiling ceremony was held in the adjoining hall. Media and guests filtered in. ESA scientists, local journalists, even a few dignitaries. A glass display case stood at the center, the prototype now encased within it, gently rotating to showcase its dual dials. One side marked Earth time. The other, adjusted for the Martian soul. Leon stood at the podium, cheeks flushed, voice steady as he looked out at the crowd. "My grandfather once said that the perfect timepiece wasn't just a tool, it was a companion, a story, a signal that someone somewhere had chosen to master the invisible rhythm of life and shape it with their hands." Today, I think he would have been proud. There was quiet reverence in the room. Leon paused, then added, "And none of this would have happened if not for someone walking into our shop on a rainy afternoon. Someone who didn't correct us when we underestimated him. Someone who simply asked questions about movement, about precision, about belief." He turned slightly to the side. Keanu was leaning against the wall, arms folded, head lowered modestly. Leon's voice softened. "He didn't just buy a watch. He bought the future of our craft." The room fell silent. Cameras flashed. But Keanu didn't move. He gave a faint smile, one only Leon saw. After the applause subsided, small groups began to form around the hall. Scientists mingled with journalists, engineers spoke with designers, and every now and then someone would drift toward the display case, drawn like gravity to the softly rotating Mars timekeeper. Leon stepped away from the podium and was immediately surrounded by a few guests. Some wanted to congratulate him. Others were curious about the technology, and a few asked about the unusual collaboration between a traditional Swiss watch shop and Hollywood's most reclusive actor. But Keanu remained near the back, leaning by a quiet corner, sipping coffee from a paper cup. He kept his gaze on the prototype, watching not for praise, but for the stillness after a storm. He had seen this moment before. The one where the crowd looks at the finished work and forgets the years of silence, of uncertainty, of invisible labor. He understood that moment better than most. Leon finally broke away and joined him by the wall. "Why didn't you want to say something?" he asked gently. Keanu gave a quiet shrug. "It's not my moment." Leon smiled. "But without you, it wouldn't have happened." Keanu didn't answer right away. He watched a little girl press her face against the glass case, her eyes wide at the rotating dials. "That's the moment I came for," he said, nodding toward her. "That curiosity, that awe." Leon followed his gaze. The girl's father knelt beside her, pointing out the dual dials and explaining the Mars soul. Leon caught the phrase, "just like astronauts will wear," and felt a wave of something between pride and disbelief. "Then they called you a dreamer, didn't they?" Keanu asked. "All my life," Leon admitted. Keanu gave a small, knowing smile. "It's always the dreamers who get laughed at first. Then they get copied." Leon looked down for a second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He slowly unwrapped it. A miniature version of the Mars timekeeper. A replica made with traditional gears, built by hand over weeks, using his grandfather's tools. "I made this to remind myself why I started," he said. "Before NASA, before the headlines, just because I believed." Keanu took it gently, studying the craftsmanship. The engraving on the back caught his eye. 3 tiny words etched in careful script. "Mark the moment." He turned it over again, feeling its weight. "You should keep this," he said. "I want you to have it," Leon replied. "You saw the moment before anyone else did." Keanu hesitated, but finally nodded. He slipped the watch into his coat pocket. "Then I'll make sure it keeps ticking." A call came over the intercom, announcing private press interviews for the project team. Leon sighed. "I guess that's me now." Keanu smiled. "Enjoy it. You've earned it." As Leon walked away, Keanu stayed behind, lingering in the space that now held a different energy, the kind of energy that builds when the past and future begin to speak to one another, when old dreams find new air to breathe. A technician approached him a few minutes later, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Reeves, we weren't expecting you at this event. If you'd like to see the test data or prototype schematics." Keanu shook his head kindly. "No need. I came to see the heartbeat." The technician looked confused. Keanu nodded toward the girl, still standing by the display. "There it is." Later that afternoon, as the exhibition wound down, a few remaining guests lingered by the glass display. The Mars timekeeper continued its quiet rotation, the red-tinted dial catching soft reflections from the overhead lights. A NASA photographer knelt nearby, capturing its profile, each image destined for future articles, mission briefings, perhaps even a museum. Backstage, Leon sat alone in a folding chair, the adrenaline of the day finally wearing off. His hands were still, but his thoughts raced. The day had gone better than he could have imagined. The watch had survived its Martian condition tests. The press had already begun calling it the heart of the mission. Yet, what stayed with him most wasn't the validation. It was Keanu's silence, his quiet belief. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Vincent, the shop's longtime craftsman, back in Geneva. "Saw the live stream. Your grandfather would be proud." "We all are." Leon smiled, his throat tightening. Another buzz, this time from an unknown number. "Brilliant work today. I'd like to connect you with our instrument design team. Call me this week. Dr. Navarro, J.B." He took a slow breath, then stood, walking back to the main floor. Keanu was still near the exit, speaking with a logistics coordinator about returning the backup prototype to Los Angeles. Leon approached him with a notebook in hand. "Before you go," Leon said, holding out the small ledger, "I want you to have this." Keanu opened it. Inside were rough sketches, handwritten specs, and margin notes from Leon's grandfather. Ideas for timekeeping in low-gravity environments, thermal compensation theories, and dual-axis calibration. "I thought these were your family archives," Keanu said, surprised. "There they are," Leo nodded. "But that day in the shop, when you asked about the Mars design, that was the first time I ever felt like they weren't just blueprints. They were seeds." Keanu looked at him. "You helped water them." Keanu slowly closed the notebook. "Then I'll carry them carefully?" A pause settled between them, gentle, quiet. Not everything needed to be said out loud, not in a moment like this. Outside, the sky was beginning to shift. Early evening sun pierced through thin clouds, casting long shadows across the facility's modern facade. Leon walked with Keanu toward the entrance. Staff and guests were beginning to leave, murmuring farewells, exchanging business cards, and already talking about next steps. "NASA's calling it a model for legacy tech partnerships," Leon said. "Traditional makers with modern missions." "They're not wrong," Keanu replied. They reached the doors. Keanu paused and looked back one last time at the exhibition space. "You'll have to build more of these," he said. Leon smiled. "We already have orders." As Keanu stepped outside, a young intern hurried after him. "Mr. Reeves?" she asked breathlessly. "I just wanted to say, I've never seen someone like you take interest in something so small." He stopped, thoughtful. "Nothing is small when it tells time," he said. She blinked, unsure how to respond, but Keanu simply nodded and continued walking, his silhouette growing smaller in the late afternoon light. Back inside, Leon returned to the glass case. He stood in front of the Mars timekeeper, alone now, no crowd, no cameras. Just him and the tick of the device his grandfather once dreamed into sketches. Somewhere between Earth and Mars, one day, this very rhythm would keep someone safe, awake, coordinated, human. He touched the glass gently and whispered, "We're still keeping time, Grandpa." It arrived without fanfare, no signature required, no handwritten note on the outside. Just a small, matte-deck parcel resting quietly on the steps of Keanu's home, half-shadowed by a nearby fern. He picked it up, instinctively knowing who it was from, though no label confirmed it. He took it inside, set it on his kitchen table, and stood for a moment just looking at it. The box was heavier than it appeared, dense with intention. When he finally opened it, the soft hinge let out a whisper. Inside was a velvet-lined chamber that held not just a watch, but a journey. The Mars timekeeper. Its form was quiet brilliance. The body was brushed titanium, cool and durable to the touch, designed for the extremes of space yet balanced like a violin. 2 dials, one for Earth, one calibrated to Martian soul time, moved in perfect synchrony, but each obeying a different rhythm. The hands glided smoothly, with mechanical precision softened by grace, and set in the center was a dark, glistening stone, an actual sliver of Martian meteorite, suspended beneath the crystal like a heart still beating with stardust. Keanu turned the watch over in his hand and found it there, engraved on the caseback in script so fine it nearly vanished into the metal. "For the man who told us to keep going." He stared at the words for a long time. Then, beneath the watch, he saw a small, folded card. Leon's handwriting was neat, sharp from years of careful apprenticeship. The message was short, but it carried the weight of everything they'd built together. "Without your belief, this would still be a sketch in a dusty notebook. From Geneva to JPL, every tick carries your legacy too. Thank you for seeing what others didn't." Keanu set the card down and slipped the watch onto his wrist. It felt almost weightless, as if it had already adapted to the future. He listened, not for sound, but for meaning. The ticking was gentle, nearly imperceptible, but it was there, steadfast as ever. A tiny heartbeat, marking time not just for him, but for a generation. He didn't speak. He rarely did when moments felt this big. Instead, he crossed the room to his desk by the window, where the late afternoon light pooled across scattered pages, old notebooks, a half-drained cup of tea, and a small pile of wood shavings from a knife-carved figurine he had abandoned the week before. Keanu picked up a pencil and pulled a fresh page from the pad. Not for words. Not yet. He began to draw. The pencil moved slowly at first, as if unsure of its own path. Then, with increasing confidence, it traced out the curve of a watch face, not sleek or futuristic, but classic in structure. Keanu's hand paused only once as he imagined something more. A thermal chamber integrated discreetly into the case, allowing the mechanism to adjust to drastic external temperature swings. He shaded in a subtle groove where adaptive material could expand and contract without disrupting the movement. It wasn't a finished concept, just the beginning of one. But there was something deeply satisfying about it. Here, on the page, tradition met tomorrow. The line work reflected not just design, but reverence for Leon's grandfather, for the lost art of creating something that outlives its maker, and for the quiet rhythm of time itself. He labeled the sketch with a single line, "Analog resilience, Martian adaptation." Then he turned the paper over and wrote 2 sentences that had been echoing in his head ever since he'd slipped the Mars watch onto his wrist. Every second matters, even on Mars. He folded the page neatly, slid it into a plain envelope, and tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat. Then, just before nightfall, he booked a last-minute flight to Geneva. He didn't call ahead. No one knew he was coming. By the time Keanu stepped through the door of Tourbillon timepieces the following evening, the shop was closing. The lights were dimmed, and only Leon remained, wiping down the glass displays with slow, methodical strokes. He looked up, startled at the sound of the bell above the door. For a moment, he simply blinked. Keanu gave a small wave and a quiet smile, as if to say, "Don't make this a thing." Leon hurried over, stunned. "You came back?" "At a delivery. Of my own," Keanu said softly. He reached into his coat and handed over the envelope. Leon opened it slowly, unfolding the sketch with reverence. His eyes widened as he studied the contours, the subtle details, the fusion of legacy and innovation. You designed this?" he whispered. Keanu nodded. "It's just an idea, a thought experiment, but I think it belongs here." Leon held the paper like it was a sacred blueprint. He looked back at Keanu, visibly moved. "I don't know what to say." "You already said it," Keanu replied. "With what you built, I just added a line." Leon stepped aside and motioned to the back of the shop, where the Mars prototype now sat in a dedicated display. Next to it, an entire wall had been redesigned. Framed images of the early sketches. A photo of Keanu's visit, discreet but centered. A quote etched into the glass. "Some watches don't just measure time, they carry it forward." Keanu stood before the display, quietly admiring how far things had come. The Mars prototype was no longer just a design in a notebook. It had taken form, survived pressure tests, and was now scheduled for the next joint calibration trial between ESA and JPL. All because one apprentice dared to believe a sketch. Leon carefully placed Keanu's drawing next to the others, right in the center. He didn't ask for a signature, didn't ask for fanfare, just framed it beneath the handwritten words, "Every second matters." Even on Mars. The two stood in silence, the only sound the soft ticking of a handmade regulator on the wall. The room seemed to pulse with a kind of reverence, each second a small echo of the past speaking to the future. "I think he would like this," Keanu said quietly. "Who?" Leon asked. "Your grandfather." Leon's eyes softened. "He always said a great watch doesn't just tell time, it tells truth." Keanu nodded slowly, then looked around the shop. Though modern touches had been added, the soul of the place remained untouched. The warm wood counters, the subtle scent of oil and metal, the quiet pride in craftsmanship. It reminded him of something his own mentors had told him again and again, to leave every room better than you found it. He had tried to do that here, and yet it wasn't about him. This shop, this project, this journey, it belonged to those who stayed, who kept creating even when no one was watching, who built with their hands and believed with their hearts. As Keanu moved to leave, Leon stopped him, reaching beneath the counter. "I have something for you," he said. "A thank you." He brought out a small velvet pouch and handed it to Keanu. Inside was a second version of the Mars prototype, but with one detail changed. Engraved on the case back were the words, "For the man who told us to keep going." Keanu held the watch in his palm for a long time. The metal was cool, the weight familiar, but the sentiment? That was the part that settled deepest. He looked up and simply said, "Thank you." They shook hands. No photos, no press. Just two men, one older, one younger, sharing a moment that needed no audience. Then Keanu stepped out into the night, the cool Geneva air wrapping around him as he disappeared down the quiet street, the watch safe in his coat pocket. Somewhere in the distance, the city bells chimed the hour, and above him, in a sky turning darker by the minute, a single, bright red dot shimmered in stillness. Mars. Behind him, the light in the shop remained on. Leon stood inside, looking down at the newest addition to their legacy wall. Keanu's sketch, now framed beside the original Mars design. Time had a funny way of returning things to where they belonged. The prototype had gone to the stars, but the watch, the idea, the belief, that had found its way home. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Geneva shop, casting soft light on the polished glass cases. Outside, a small group of school children huddled beneath umbrellas, their teacher motioning for them to enter. Among them was a girl no older than 9, her bright eyes darting eagerly between the rain-soaked cobblestones and the shimmering timepieces inside. The moment they stepped through the door, Leon felt the room shift. Children often treated the shop like a museum, walking slowly, whispering to each other in awe. But this girl stepped closer to the Mars Timekeeper display with a kind of quiet purpose. She didn't press her nose to the glass or point like the others. Instead, she stood still, gazing. Leon approached gently, crouching beside her. "Do you like watches?" he asked with a kind smile. She nodded, then pointed to the dual-dial model in the center. "That one. Why does it have 2 clocks?" "That's the Mars watch," Leon explained. "One dial shows Earth time, the other shows time on Mars." Her eyes widened. "Is it real?" "Very real," Leon said, pulling a small tool from his pocket. He gently opened the back panel, revealing the intricate movement inside. This was made by hand, using skills passed down for generations, and now it tells time for 2 worlds. Around them, the teacher guided the other students through the shop's sections, inheritage pieces, moon-phase models, and the long wall titled Time Beyond Earth. Framed there were 2 objects: Keanu's original letter, yellowed slightly at the edges but kept pristine, and the blueprint of the first Mars Timekeeper prototype. Beneath them sat a glass pedestal that held the lunar watch, the very one Keanu had purchased on his first visit. It no longer had a price tag, no one would dare ask. It was part of the story now, just like the letter and the sketch. Leon turned back to the girl. "What's your name?" "Amira," she said, shyly. He smiled. "Amira, let me show you something special." He lifted the Mars prototype gently from the display with gloved hands and held it just close enough for her to see the red dial flecked with actual Martian meteorite. "This watch will be part of the first human mission to Mars." "And you made it?" she asked in awe. Leon hesitated for just a second. "I helped bring it to life, but someone believed in it long before me. A watchmaker, and a man who saw more than what was in front of him." Mira stared at the glowing dials and whispered, "I want to make things like this one day." "Then you will," Leon said, his voice full of quiet certainty. "Because the world will always need people who build with care." He handed her a small pamphlet, part history, part inspiration, titled Timekeepers of 2 Worlds. "Keep this," he said. "You're part of the story now too." As the school group moved on to the next exhibit, Amira remained near the Mars Timekeeper wall. Her teacher called her name, but she lingered a moment longer, fingers brushing the glass case one last time. Leon watched her go, her small silhouette framed against the streetlight, pooling through the front windows. He stood quietly for a moment, letting the stillness settle, then walked back toward the wall. The framed letter beside the blueprint had become something of a pilgrimage for visitors who knew the full story. In delicate, looping handwriting, it captured a craftsman's soul speaking across time. Keanu had written it not to impress, not for publicity, but to honor someone he had never met, Leon's grandfather, a watchmaker who had dared to dream past gravity. Leon read the letter often, not out of ego, but to remind himself why it all mattered. To the man who first imagined time across two worlds, your hands shaped more than gears and metal. You shaped the future. I never met you, but I saw you in the details, the patience, the defiance, the belief that craftsmanship could outlast the stars. You may not have lived to see this dream realized, but I promise you, it lives. Sometimes, all an idea needs is someone to believe in it a little longer. Keanu, session. Tell your grandson to keep going. The original sketch below it showed the now famous dual dial, one for Earth's 24-hour rhythm, the other set to the Martian sol. It was clean, intentional, and just whimsical enough to be bold. A signature curved arc at the top of the face bore a crescent silhouette, a nod to the lunar dust watch. And on the reverse of the blueprint, in faded pencil, was a barely legible note written decades ago by Leon's grandfather. One day, maybe this will matter. Now it did. Footsteps approached behind Leon, slow and careful. It was Emile. He didn't speak at first, simply stood beside Leon and gazed at the wall. For a long while, there was only the soft ticking of clocks all around them. He reminded me of you, Emile finally said. Leon raised an eyebrow. That little girl, the way she looked at that watch, Emile said, voice lower than usual. Like it wasn't just about time. Like it was about possibility. Leon nodded. That's what it's always been about. Emile exhaled. I was wrong, you know. About all of it. About the Mars design, about you, even about him. He gestured toward Keanu's letter. He walked in here in the rain, and I judged him without even knowing his name. And he changed everything. Leon didn't offer pity. He didn't need to. The shop had changed, and so had Emile. Slowly, without fanfare. We've all had to learn, Leon said. Emile offered a rare smile. You're doing more than keeping the family business alive. You're expanding it beyond anything your grandfather or I ever imagined. Leon looked again at the girl's pamphlet, now resting on the counter. We all pass the story down, piece by piece. And she'll pass it on again, Emile said. Leon turned to the window. Outside, the girl had rejoined her classmates, but she clutched the pamphlet in both hands, holding it close, like a secret worth protecting. That evening, as twilight settled over Geneva, Leon dimmed the main lights of the shop and activated only the warm gallery lamps along the Mars wall. The glow cast gentle halos across the framed letter, the prototype sketch, and the lunar watch nestled in its pedestal. Visitors still occasionally asked if it was for sale. He always answered the same way, with a soft shake of the head and a smile. It wasn't a product anymore, it was a witness. Leon made his way to the back, stopping at Keanu's letter once more. Beneath it, tucked in the corner of the display, was something most guests didn't notice unless they leaned in. Keanu's sketch. The one he had quietly left during a later visit, months after the first purchase. Its design was unique, even visionary. A hybrid of traditional analog movement and adaptive temperature resistance that reacted subtly to environmental shifts. It was unlike anything Leon had seen, and yet it carried the same spirit his grandfather's drawings had. A line beneath it simply read, "Every second matters, even on Mars." That phrase had since become something of a quiet mantra in the shop. Apprentices whispered it when fitting a difficult gear. Visitors murmured it under their breath while examining the Mars collection. For Leon, it meant never underestimating the ripple of a single moment. A conversation, a rainy afternoon, a man in a hoodie no one recognized until it was too late to undo the assumptions. He returned to his bench at the side of the room, where a small case lay open. Inside was a new movement he was assembling, one that might eventually fly to Mars. He reached for his tools, hand steady, heart full. Outside, the street had quieted, the last of the day's tourists gone. But through the wide front window, framed by wood and brass, the red glow of the Mars timekeeper wall was still visible. A beacon in the night. A watchmaker's window to another world. And somewhere, perhaps far from here or closer than anyone thought, another child was dreaming, not just of space, or time, or stars, but of building something with their own hands, something that could last, something that could connect hearts across planets. Leon smiled to himself, wound the crown gently, and let the tick begin. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Geneva shop, casting soft light on the polished glass cases. Outside, a small group of school children huddled beneath umbrellas, their teacher motioning for them to enter. Among them was a girl no older than 9, her bright eyes darting eagerly between the rain-soaked cobblestones and the shimmering timepieces inside. The moment they stepped through the door, Leon felt the room shift. Children often treated the shop like a museum, walking slowly, whispering to each other in awe. But this girl stepped closer to the Mars timekeeper display with a kind of quiet purpose. She didn't press her nose to the glass or point like the others. Instead, she stood still, gazing. Leon approached gently, crouching beside her. "Do you like watches?" he asked with a kind smile. She nodded, then pointed to the dual dial model in the center. "That one. Why does it have 2 clocks?" "That's the Mars watch," Leon explained. "One dial shows Earth time. The other shows time on Mars." Her eyes widened. "Is it real?" "Very real," Leon said, pulling a small tool from his pocket. He gently opened the back panel, revealing the intricate movement inside. This was made by hand, using skills passed down for generations, and now it tells time for 2 worlds. Around them, the teacher guided the other students through the shop's sections. Heritage pieces, moon phase models, and the long wall titled Time Beyond Earth. Framed there were 2 objects: Keanu's original letter, yellowed slightly at the edges but kept pristine, and the blueprint of the first Mars timekeeper prototype. Beneath them sat a glass pedestal that held the lunar watch, the very one Keanu had purchased on his first visit. It no longer had a price tag. No one would dare ask. It was part of the story now, just like the letter and the sketch. Leon turned back to the girl. "What's your name?" "Amiria," she said shyly. He smiled. "Amira, let me show you something special." He lifted the Mars prototype gently from the display with gloved hands and held it just close enough for her to see the red dial flecked with actual Martian meteorite. "This watch will be part of the first human mission to Mars." "And you made it?" she asked in awe. Leon hesitated for just a second. "I helped bring it to life, but someone believed in it long before me, a watchmaker, and a man who saw more than what was in front of him." Amira stared at the glowing dials and whispered, "I want to make things like this one day." "Then you will," Leon said, his voice full of quiet certainty, "because the world will always need people who build with care." He handed her a small pamphlet, part history, part inspiration, titled Timekeepers of 2 Worlds. "Keep this," he said. "You're part of the story now, too." As the school group moved on to the next exhibit, Amira remained near the Mars timekeeper wall. Her teacher called her name, but she lingered a moment longer, fingers brushing the glass case one last time. Leon watched her go, her small silhouette framed against the streetlight pooling through the front windows. He stood quietly for a moment, letting the stillness settle, then walked back toward the wall. The framed letter beside the blueprint had become something of a pilgrimage for visitors who knew the full story. In delicate, looping handwriting, it captured a craftsman's soul speaking across time. Keanu had written it not to impress, not for publicity, but to honor someone he had never met, Leon's grandfather, a watchmaker who had dared to dream past gravity. Leon read the letter often, not out of ego, but to remind himself why it all mattered. To the man who first imagined time across two worlds. Your hands shape more than gears and metal. You shaped the future. I never met you, but I saw you in the details. The patience, the defiance, the belief that craftsmanship could outlast the stars. You may not have lived to see this dream realized, but I promise you, it lives. Sometimes, all an idea needs is someone to believe in it a little longer. Keanu. P.S. Tell your grandson to keep going. The original sketch below it showed the now famous dual dial, one for Earth's 24-hour rhythm, the other set to the Martian soul. It was clean, intentional, and just whimsical enough to be bold. A signature curved arc at the top of the face bore a crescent silhouette, a nod to the lunar dust watch. And on the reverse of the blueprint, in faded pencil, was a barely legible note written decades ago by Leon's grandfather. One day maybe this will matter. No, it did. Footsteps approached behind Leon, slow and careful. It was Emile. He didn't speak at first, simply stood beside Leon and gazed at the wall. For a long while, there was only the soft ticking of clocks all around them. "You reminded me of you," Emile finally said. Leon raised an eyebrow. "That little girl. The way she looked at that watch." Emile said, voice lower than usual, like it wasn't just about time, like it was about possibility. Leon nodded. "That's what it's always been about." Emile exhaled. "I was wrong, you know, about all of it, about the Mars design, about you, even about him." He gestured toward Keanu's letter. "He walked in here in the rain and I judged him without even knowing his name, and he changed everything." Leon didn't offer pity. He didn't need to. The shop had changed, and so had Emile, slowly, without fanfare. "We've all had to learn," Leon said. Emile offered a rare smile. "You're doing more than keeping the family business alive. You're expanding it beyond anything your grandfather or I ever imagined." Leon looked again at the girl's pamphlet, now resting on the counter. "We all pass the story down, piece by piece, and she'll pass it on again," Emile said. Leon turned to the window. Outside, the girl had rejoined her classmates, but she clutched the pamphlet in both hands, holding it close, like a secret worth protecting. That evening, as twilight settled over Geneva, Leon dimmed the main lights of the shop and activated only the warm gallery lamps along the Mars wall. The glow cast gentle halos across the framed letter, the prototype sketch, and the lunar watch nestled in its pedestal. Visitors still occasionally asked if it was for sale. He always answered the same way, with a soft shake of the head and a smile. It wasn't a product anymore, it was a witness. Leon made his way to the back, stopping at Keanu's letter once more. Beneath it, tucked in the corner of the display, was something most guests didn't notice unless they leaned in. Keanu's sketch. The one he had quietly left during a later visit, months after the first purchase. Its design was unique, even visionary. A hybrid of traditional analog movement and adaptive temperature resistance that reacted subtly to environmental shifts. It was unlike anything Leon had seen, and yet it carried the same spirit his grandfather's drawings had. A line beneath it simply read, "Every second matters, even on Mars." That phrase had since become something of a quiet mantra in the shop. Apprentices whispered it when fitting a difficult gear. Visitors murmured it under their breath, while examining the Mars collection. For Leon, it meant never underestimating the ripple of a single moment. A conversation, a rainy afternoon. A man in a hoodie no one recognized until it was too late to undo the assumptions. He returned to his bench at the side of the room, where a small case lay open. Inside was a new movement he was assembling, one that might eventually fly to Mars. He reached for his tools, hands steady, heart full. Outside, the street had quieted, the last of the day's tourists gone. But through the wide front window, framed by wood and brass, the red glow of the Mars timekeeper wall was still visible. A beacon in the night, a watchmaker's window to another world. And somewhere, perhaps far from here or closer than anyone thought, another child was dreaming, not just of space or time or stars, but of building something with their own hands, something that could last, something that could connect hearts across planets. Leon smiled to himself, wound the crown gently, and let the tick begin. The observatory sat nestled in the hills above Santa Ynez, quiet and windswept in the late afternoon light. Keanu stepped out of his rental car, hands in his jacket pockets, boots crunching the gravel path as he walked toward the entrance. He didn't notify anyone of his visit. He wasn't here to be recognized or celebrated. He had come to look up, just look, and feel small, in the best kind of way. Inside, the space was hushed. A single researcher nodded politely as Keanu signed the guest log and made his way to the main telescope room. The air was cool, the domed ceiling above groaning faintly as it rotated, in preparation for evening tracking. Keanu approached the telescope and leaned over, peering through the lens. There it was, Mars, a reddish speck against the velvet black. Not just a planet now, but a destination, a project, a symbol of what people could do if they dared enough, and believed in things long enough. Keanu stood there a long time, breathing slowly. On his left wrist, the Mars timekeeper watch ticked in dual rhythm, Earth time on the top dial, Martian soul on the lower. The gentle ticking was a comfort, like a heartbeat that stretched between worlds. He adjusted the strap and glanced at it, watching the seconds pass on both sides. Time. He thought about Leon, standing behind the counter that first rainy afternoon. Nervous, uncertain, brimming with quiet talent. He thought about the sketches, the dismissed prototypes, the grandfather whose hands had once shaped tiny gears in a backroom workshop. He thought about how none of it was supposed to matter, and yet, somehow it did. Then his phone buzzed. Keanu pulled it from his coat pocket, expecting a casual reminder from a friend or a check-in from his agent. But the name on the screen made him pause. It was a forwarded email from JPL's mission director, subject, official certification. Keanu opened the email slowly, his eyes scanning the lines. The message was brief, but carried weight beyond words. The Balfour dual-time prototype Series 3A has passed all final phase certifications for Martian surface deployment. It will be included as standard mission instrumentation for crew members of the 2030 Mars Habitat Program. Congratulations. For a moment, Keanu didn't move. The hum of the observatory's electronics filled the silence. Somewhere overhead, the motor in the rotating dome clicked into position. He exhaled quietly, then looked again through the telescope. Mars hadn't changed, still distant, still unreachable in so many ways. But now it bore something of Earth. Not just astronauts, not just rovers or modules. It would carry the heartbeat of a family workshop, of a young man who believed in tradition, of a grandfather who sketched a dream and tucked it away where no one would find it. Until someone did. Keanu let the weight of the moment settle. He remembered the quiet letter he left behind for Leon's grandpart, folded under the Mars notebook, never meant to be read by its recipient, but written anyway. That letter wasn't just for a man long gone. It was for anyone who ever created something without knowing if the world would understand it. For the quiet artists, the patient builders, the silent givers. He checked the time again. Earth, 7:48 p.m. Mars, Sol, 219. 3:42. Different worlds, same ticking heart. The researcher from earlier noticed him standing still by the telescope. "Clear night," she said gently. Keanu nodded. "Best kind." He didn't explain. There was no need. Instead, he tucked the phone away and walked outside. The horizon still held a pale streak of gold where the sun had dipped moments ago. The stars blinked on one by one. He leaned against the railing and looked upward once more, the cool air brushing his face. He thought about the girl in the Geneva shop, the one with the wide eyes and steady hands. He hoped she'd return. He hoped she'd build. That someone would show her the letter in the glass frame, that someone would tell her the story. Not about a celebrity buying a watch, but about what it meant to believe in something enough to make it real. As the last of the visitors left the observatory, Keanu remained alone on the terrace, the hum of the telescope's dome fading behind him. He looked down at his wrist. The Mars watch ticked softly, its dual dials moving in harmony. Earth's familiar pace and Mars' longer rhythm, dancing side by side like old friends. It wasn't just a timepiece anymore. It was a symbol, a connection. His thoughts wandered to Leon, likely still in the workshop or sketching under lamplight, tweaking something that already worked just to see if it could be better. He could picture the careful precision of his fingers, the same patience his grandfather once held, the same curiosity that kept tradition alive in the age of digital silence. In his mind, Keanu could still hear the way Leon had once whispered, "You think this could really matter?" And how, without hesitation, Keanu had replied, "It already does." He pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket. The corners were worn, the leather soft from years of use. He flipped past pages filled with thoughts, quotes, fragments of things that never made it into interviews. On a blank page, he wrote, "Time doesn't ask for applause. It just moves forward. Quiet, faithful, steady. But in the hands of someone who cares, it becomes more than movement. It becomes memory. It becomes meaning." He closed the notebook and looked up. Somewhere, far beyond sight, was a world painted red and cold. And ticking quietly within it would be something made in a corner of Geneva, born from sketches that once sat forgotten under glass. Keanu smiled. He remembered what he had told Leon that first day, standing in front of the prototype case. "It's not just a watch," he'd said. "It's a story of belief in the impossible." And now, impossibility had folded into reality. Because someone believed. Because someone stayed. Because kindness, when offered with no expectation, changes everything. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Leon. It was a picture of a new apprentice at the shop. A young boy no older than 10, eyes wide with wonder as he held a magnifier to a gear. Behind him hung the framed letter Keanu had written. Underneath it, in new block letters, a brass plate read, "Keep going." Keanu stared at the image, his heart still and full. The Mars wind hadn't touched them yet, but the gears had already turned. He walked back inside the observatory one last time. The telescope sat still now, pointed at nothing in particular. Before leaving, Keanu placed his hand gently on the side of the instrument and whispered, barely loud enough for the walls to hear, "Every second matters, even on Mars." Then he turned and walked into the night, the steady rhythm of the watch guiding his steps, as stars kept time across two worlds. Keanu's voice, soft yet steady, begins to carry the weight of the story as the screen fades into images of a quiet observatory, the Geneva shop under gentle twilight, and close-up shots of the Mars timekeeper ticking on his wrist. Over these visuals, his reflective tone emerges. Sometimes the smallest things change the course of our lives. A humble watch, set in motion by misjudgment and nurtured by quiet encouragement, can lead to a breakthrough that ripples through time. I never imagined that a single act, a simple purchase, a gentle question, a kind nod, could spark an international dialogue about tradition, innovation, and hope. But that's exactly what happened. I remember the day clearly, the rain, the quiet hum of a Geneva shop filled with relics of decades past, and the unexpected presence of a man in a hoodie with unassuming clothes. I saw him in the midst of our shared world of gears and delicate movements, questioning not the price, but the very essence of craftsmanship. In that moment, labels faded, and I witnessed something far more important: a genuine belief in the value of what has been built with care. There's a lesson in every tick of a well-made timepiece. It isn't just about measuring seconds. It's about honoring the hands that built it, the dreams that inspired it, and the possibility that even in a world ruled by rapid change, a steadfast heartbeat can still keep us grounded. I watched as the Mars timekeeper prototype was born out of a dream passed down from a grandfather to his apprentice, and then nurtured quietly by those who believed that even the impossible must be given a chance. This journey, from misjudgment to a breakthrough, reminds me that when we look beyond appearances, when we see potential where others see impossibility, we open doors to worlds we never knew existed. That day, the gift of a watch wasn't merely an acquisition. It was an affirmation that our heritage, our passion, and our relentless pursuit of excellence matter. It taught me that kindness, especially the quiet kind that doesn't seek applause, can transform lives and industries. Now, as I stand here with time ticking in two worlds on my wrist, I realize that what we do with our time defines us. Every moment is a chance to be better, to inspire, to leave something meaningful behind. And so, I want you to reflect on your own journey. Think about that one moment when you may have misjudged someone by how they looked, only to discover an unexpected depth of character later. Those moments shape us, challenge us, and remind us that every second matters, even on Mars. So many people think change comes from grand gestures or loud declarations, but more often, it begins in silence, in a quiet shop, in the eyes of someone who refuses to give up on their craft, or in a single sentence spoken at just the right time. Keep going. That phrase lived in Leon long after our conversation. It lived in his hands as he assembled the prototype. It lived in the sketchbook that once gathered dust behind a glass case and now rests framed beside a wall of history titled Time Beyond Earth. It lives in every student who walks through that Geneva shop on school trips and discovers that storytelling can happen through gears and precision, not just words. The most moving part for me wasn't the headlines or the attention. It was the moment a young watchmaker, once dismissed as dreaming too big, stood at the European Space Agency and said, he didn't just buy a watch. He bought the future of our craft. That's when I knew the ripple had turned into a wave. And still, I wonder, how many other Leons are out there? How many brilliant young minds have been turned away because of how they look, where they come from, or how quietly they speak? How many dreams sit tucked inside sketchbooks, waiting for someone to say, these matter? That's why we tell stories, not to glorify one person's action, but to show that all of us, every one of us, has the power to change someone's future with a moment of belief. Whether you're a student, a craftsman, a mother, a scientist, or someone who's been told you don't belong here, remember, you do. The past and the future are not opposite directions. They're connected by the steps we take today. So, I'll leave you with this. Have you ever misjudged someone by how they looked? What did you learn from that moment? And what story should we tell next about Keanu Reeves and time, family, or redemption? Let us know in the comments. Because sometimes, the best designs just need the right moment and the right heart to believe in them. Thank you for listening. I hope you carry this story with you the next time you wind a watch, meet a stranger, or find yourself wondering whether small acts matter. They do. They always will.